I first met a company called Beaton at an event that they had called First Mover, and I subsequently saw them present to one of my clients. We actually have a mutual client. In that presentation, I was really impressed with the work that these guys do at Beaton. Clearly, their role in life is to use evidence in order to help professional firms perform a little better.
Tagline in our research on benchmarks is take the guesswork out of strategy.
Which I like, and I also liked, and that's something I saw in your foyer, which was evidence-based decision making.
Yes,
I
exactly.
thought that's outstanding, and I'm sure that that's what Beaton Consulting provides. Let's just talk a bit about the customer base that Beaton's got. So obviously that's one of your key roles, it's your relationships and selling into existing and wishing obviously for more and for new relationships. But I mean, my impression is that Beaton, it knows who the heavyweights are in town, and that's who it attracts. Am I accurate in saying that?
In our professional service client base, which is one of the three client bases we work in, but in professional services, we've worked with the majority of the largest professional service firms in the country. So we've worked at some point or another with all of the big four accounting firms, every one of the top 10 largest law firms in the country, and around 3/4 of the largest consulting engineering firms in the country.
Okay. Who would I call if I wanted to make some phone calls and say, you know, this benchmarking, I've watched a film, and in that film it sounds pretty good, yeah, but I need some referees. So what would I do? Would I call you up and then you provide me with some referees?
Absolutely, we could do that depending on what the particular need was. But in terms of the firms who are most willing to speak to the benefits they've got, that's firms like Aurecon in consulting engineering, PwC,
yeah.
KPMG,
Herbert Smith Freehills.
It's now the 13th largest law firm in the world. In any one year, we're delivering results to between 35 and 45 individual firms.
Okay, terrific. So obviously repeat customers is very important. So you've got your benchmark survey, and presumably satisfied customers come back.
And interestingly, it's usually from those firms who had the biggest shock the first time around.
Yeah.
And we're working with one firm at the moment who said, you know, when we first got this research in 2006, I think was the first year they really looked at it in detail. The partners looked at the research and the results, and their jaws hit the floor. Yeah. They said, we can't believe that we're actually performing that poorly. And in 3 or 4 years, they turned that around, and now they're one of the best performing firms consistently in the country.
So Mel, you mentioned that you are in charge of benchmarks.
Yes.
So what's benchmarks?
It's a research product that is aimed at helping professional service firms understand their client base better and improve their performance in various ways. We look at what's happening in the market, how does your brand fit in that, and how does that help you to win more work, and how do your clients actually rate their experience with you as a service provider, all with the aim of really driving growth in client retention, client revenues and satisfaction.
It sounds potentially a little scary to me. Like the honesty of it could be a bit scary because, you know, in business, I mean, I'm obviously in the relationship business, and you might think you've got a really good relationship, but then all of a sudden people like you come along and say, actually, so has this happened to you much? We
have had some clients come and say, we'd rather not know, or I don't think the partners are going to accept the findings, so we'd better not tell them.
Okay. We had one client who the marketing team used to have it delivered in a brown paper bag.
Yeah, we had to bring the bag with them.
As you say, like when the news is bad,
yeah.
In professional service firms, where, let's face it, you've got a few egos.
Indeed.
It can be confronting enough that they turn around and say, well, we don't want to hear that message.
Mel, what's next for Beaton Benchmarks?
We have just gone through a process of reinvigorating the Australian product and really trying to focus it on what's important to the market at the moment. Obviously, we're going through quite a bit of turmoil out there in the economy, so we've redesigned our product for this year moving forward around things that will be a lot more pertinent to firms here. And then beyond Australia, we are talking about more global benchmarks, so
That's
working
good.
with partners in the UK and the US and in Asia as well.
The other international regions we're in, we're going back to New Zealand this year, which is almost international. And
There's a C in the middle.
and South Africa. We've actually just completed a study in South Africa as well.
Beaton?
As Beaton.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got Beaton in New Zealand, you got Beaton in South Africa, and you're doing deals with other providers in other markets.
In the UK and,
Fantastic.
and America.
Okay, so a third of the firms in any given category aren't using Beaton benchmarks. So why? I presume they do it because they think they can do it themselves. Is that the reason why?
Well, I think there's sometimes a doubt about what the difference between, or a misunderstanding about the difference between benchmarking and their own research actually is. And the reason we got into doing this was because we did a lot of those kinds of studies for firms for a number of years. And in fact, I remember we'd done about 8 or 9 studies directly on behalf of clients and done some benchmarking in it, or what we thought was benchmarking. And it turned out that all the firms that we measured always turned out to be in the top 3. And when you do that for 8 firms and they all turn out to be in the top 3, you kind of know there's something wrong with your method. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we changed to a true independent benchmarking method, which actually compares firms on a level playing field. So there's no distortion in the data.
Okay, so that's interesting. When you say a true benchmarking method,
Yeah.
just explain that a little more.
Well, what happens when you try and talk to just your own clients, the ones who appear on your list, and say, well, how are we doing, and how are we doing compared to other firms? Inherently, that is a biased sample. It's not independent in any way. Mm-hmm. So when you're asking them, well, how do we then compare to our competitors? You're not measuring the performance of your competitors against their best clients. You're performing against your best clients. Mm-hmm. So
It's like me asking all of your best friends, how much do you like Russell? Other examples are, say, of firms who do their own research and think that they're doing pretty well because they're getting 75, 80% of their clients saying, you're good, you're excellent. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the benchmarks, a 75% of your client base saying excellent is actually well below par when you compare it to the broader industry. So it helps to put the results into context, your client satisfaction into context, to say, well, do we actually have a problem? And we were constantly coming across data that said, you're technically great to work with, but you're too expensive.
Right.
Get to the next firm. Right. You're technically great, you're great to work with, you're too expensive.
Yes, of course.
Everyone can't be all those things at once. So that's what made us really start to think, is there a way to do this without having that bias that's coming into the data? So,
especially around things like being expensive, because the question isn't as a law firm or an accounting firm.
Of course you're expensive. You're a professional service firm. You're expected to be expensive.
Yeah. But are you
more
that much more expensive than the next guy or your competitors? That's what's important.
So obviously there is research and then there's consulting. So you'll give a firm some benchmarks.
Yes.
Do you then advise on actions that can be undertaken in order to improve?
Definitely.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about maybe some examples or case studies where you've helped firms improve.
We've recently worked with one firm who we helped essentially write a business case for a multi-year investment in improving client service as a result of the data that we provided them over the last couple of years. They said, well, we've been doing this for a couple of years and we're not seeing the shifts that we wanted to just by getting the data. How do we actually make some significant cultural change to really turn around what is some below average performance?
So tell me, I'm in receipt of a benchmarking deck. I'm managing a service business. So how would I use that in order to help me conduct better professional services? Mel?
The types of decisions that could help a firm answer are things like, where should we be investing our resources in terms of training and development? Which parts of the firm are high flyers and that we can learn off? Where should we be entering the market because there's an opportunity where either there's growth happening or our competitors aren't doing that well and we think we could capitalise on that. Mm-hmm. What other sorts of decisions, just in terms of C-suite?
Well, also just once you set a series of investments or initiatives in place to be able to track your performance.
How that's going, yeah.
But I think possibly the most powerful thing that it allows a management team to do is to get buy-in to a change, because you've in professional services firms you've got some pretty strong-willed people at the top, and they take a lot of convincing, especially if you're asking them to change something. And so this provides robust data for firms and management teams to say, here's where we should go and here's why, and it's incontrovertible that that's how we're doing.
Got it.
Rather than managing based on who can shout loudest.
Instinct and yes, and who's
An
loudest.
anecdote.
Does the benchmarking survey create same pricing?
No, it creates value pricing because it helps you identify, how are we actually going on delivering to our clients, and are we that much better? And if we're that much better but not charging anymore, we're leaving money on the table.
So there's an opportunity there for clients of Beaton to actually perhaps improve their pricing.
Yes.
Oh, I can think of a specific one particular mid-tier accounting firm who got the results, and it said very clearly, look, you've got price setting discretion here. And in the next year, they raised their prices by their fees by on average. No, it was to 12%. I think it was the figure.
Across
12
the
or
board.
13% on average across the board.
Yeah.
They didn't lose a single client.
Well done them.
So
that's good.
That's
Great, yeah.
that's
and
a good
I
outcome.
think that should be the last thing on this film.
Yeah.
Well done. And thank you for watching our short film about Beaton. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Tristan.